So I figured, since I did 2 videos critiquing the new craptacular take on the Thundercats, that I'd talk about a reboot I enjoyed. And since this is a comic book review channel, what better place to start than the 2002 Thundercats comic series. These were published by Wildstorm, which had just become a DC Comics imprint. The books picked up where the TV series ended, with Mum-Ra defeated and the Thundercats living on New Thundera. Wildstorm published 5 miniseries, several one-shots, and a couple of crossovers with Superman, He-Man, and Battle of the Planets. I only read the first 2 miniseries and the Heroes and Villains and Heroes one-shots. The latter 2 were basically histories of different characters from the show. We got stories about how Mum-Ra became who he is, how the Sword of Omens was forged, how Chitara became a badass, and how Thundera was created and destroyed. There are a couple of other stories in there that I'm missing, but overall, it was pretty good. They're all short stories with different artists and writers. I enjoyed them because of the world building and the art. It's always interesting to see different people's take on the Thundercats, even when they suck. These 2 one-shots are definitely worth checking out. Just don't go in thinking that you're going to get a deep story. The first miniseries is called Reclaiming Thundera. It picks up right after the show ended. It's written by Ford Gilmore and has art from J. Scott Campbell, Francisco Herrera, and Ed McGuinness. McGuinness is the main artist for the series, and damn if he isn't perfect for Thundercats. His muscular, cartoony style fits right onto the characters. McGuinness has an excellent eye for panel layouts and flow. It's never difficult to figure out what's going on no matter what he draws. He's also fantastic at dynamic posing. It's like he's taking keyframes from animation and pasting them into the panels. Grade A visual storytelling. What I really enjoy about his work, just in general, is that he draws different body types very well. The Thunder Kittens look like kids, the women have feminine shapes without being overly exaggerated, and the men look like they could tear down a brick wall. Even though McGuinness basically uses the same body types over and over, he shakes it up just a little. Lion-O is sort of the baseline for the male characters. Tigra, Bengali, and Lynxo have slightly smaller builds, while Panthro is a tank. Then we get Mum-Ra, who's just an insane powerhouse. The differences are subtle, but they're there. I think it's easiest to see with the mutants, where each one of them is insanely ripped, except for Slide. But they don't all look the same. Another thing I enjoy about McGuinness's work on the book is his use of silhouettes. We'll have these panels where the characters are all blacked out except for their eyes. It just looks so cool, and he does it in his other work, especially with Batman and Superman. Ford Gilmore's story is okay. It's written like a series of standalone episodes. The opening 0 issue, which is drawn by J. Scott Campbell, sets up the underlying subplot, the corruption of Wily Cat. The kid wants to fight like everyone else, but Lion-O makes him stick to his bombs and hoverboard. The following number 1 issue sees a return of Shadow Master, the only villain who actually had a chance at defeating Lion-O and the Thundercats. This starts one of the weird things about the first miniseries. The battles wrap up too quickly. It's a nice build-up, and the fights are well done. It's just that the defeat of the villains are really quick. We see that with Shadow Master, taken out in a panel. We see that with the second issue's villains and mutants. Now, they've never been much of a threat to the Thundercats, but it's almost comical how easily they're trashed. The 4th issue shakes things up, though. We finally get back to the subplot of Mum-Ra corrupting Wily Cat. He has Mama kidnap the boy to trick Lion-O into battle. Lion-O attacks while Panthro gets Mum-Ra's sarcophagus and tosses it into the pit. Then Lion-O kills Mum-Ra. I guess. I mean, it's not really clear what happens here. But it turns out to be a trick just to get some power from the Sword of Omens so that Mum-Ra can resurrect Grun the Destroyer. For real this time. Lion-O and Grun have this really awesome fight, and then Lion-O General Zods his ass. Every fight ends like this. It's the only thing I didn't like about the miniseries. The series ends by setting up the next one, The Return. Lion-O goes into the Book of Omens to prepare to be king for what they now call Thundera. Unfortunately, when he comes out, it hasn't been a day, but 5 years. During that time, Mum-Ra defeated the Thundercats, who were led by Panthro, and enslaved them. He holds the Thunder Kittens as his personal slaves, while the others are scattered about. Snarf manages to find the Key of Omens and releases Lion-O. Ed Benez did the art for this miniseries, and Gilmore came back as the writer. The art is good. Benez is a solid artist. He's known for his work on Catwoman and his very sensual take on the female form. That's definitely still present in this miniseries, and it can be a little awkward considering the story. The visual flow isn't as strong as it was with McGuinness, but you can still follow what's going on without reading the dialogue. The story itself has less action, but where the action does happen, Benez delivers. Now, with the story is much darker than anything before. It's heavily implied that Mum-Ra uses Wily Cat as a sex slave. The same thing happens with the mutants holding Chitara. Wily Cat betrays the Thundercats, seemingly loyal to Mum-Ra. I don't mind the darker take on the characters, but it does feel like there are too many out-of-character moments. Chitara blames Lion-O for not being there even though she knows that time acts differently inside the Book of Omens. Even the subplot with Wily Cat feels out of place, because there's really nothing about his character that makes it seem like he'd betray the team. It's not like he won't or can't grow up, so his fall comes off as a little forced. I think that's mostly because in the first miniseries, we didn't get that much showing why he'd want to switch sides. At any rate, the Thundercats go with Wily Cat to Mum-Ra's pyramid, where the newly powered up mutants are waiting. Wily Cat's betrayal is revealed, and he's seemingly killed by Mum-Ra. The mutants attack, and Mum-Ra monologues about his evil plan. Like with the previous miniseries, the fights are good, but the defeat is really quick. The Thundercats take out the newly powered up mutants, no problem, and Lion-O defeats Mum-Ra. But not really. And I mean, that's what he says. Quote, "No, we can't just eradicate an evil that powerful overnight, but we can chip away at it, wear it down, weaken it, and eventually destroy it." Okay, but you've been doing this for years. How many times have you actually defeated Mum-Ra? I mean, he's a mummy, not a Final Fantasy boss. Shouldn't he be dead by now? Nope. That little punch to the chest didn't do nothing. Even as the Thundercats walk away, Mum-Ra comes back. Seriously, how can they not hear this happening? If they just turn around, they could see it. So Mum-Ra monologues again, and then reveals that Wily Cat isn't dead, but running off on his own. Overall, the second miniseries has a more cohesive feel. It's clearly an ongoing narrative, but it lacks the charm of the first series, and I think that was because of the darker tone. These books were clearly written for folks who watched the Thundercats in the 80s and maybe on Cartoon Network's Toonami during the 90s. They bank on knowledge of the series, so if you've never watched Thundercats, you might be lost because none of it is really explained. If you did watch the show, even if it's been a while, I think you'll enjoy these books. I didn't read the other miniseries that continued the story, so I can't vouch for them, but these books I think are worth checking out. If you've read any of the Wildstorm Thundercats books, let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. Thanks for listening.